This is part 2 of covering Dan from Extra Credits, Stop Normalizing Nazis, Socially Conscious Game Design. We covered the first 2 minutes and 22 seconds of this stupidest video of all fucking time in part 1, where we just demonstrated that Dan can't tell the difference between a game and reality, and that Dan actually doesn't know how to convince people of any kind of ideology that he supports. He only knows how to live in constant paranoid fear of the ideologies of competing people that he disagrees with. Dan also thinks that an iron cross is a Nazi symbol, which it is not. And there's not a whole lot charitable I could say about what he previously said. And that we basically were actually running around in circles for half an hour. But hopefully we can get into something a little bit more educational here. And we're not talking about bargain basement retardism. Let's go.
It seems like such a small and simple thing. But it's things like this that erode our safeguards against dangers we sacrifice so much to fight.
Dan, what do you think is a safeguard from danger? Dan is saying if we do not censor people from so much as looking at a Nazi, not being propagandized to, not being sermonized or proselytized to by any kind of ideology, just the fact that we spawn into a multiplayer deathmatch as a team that has the skin of a historically fascist group, and then is exposed to literally no ideology or actual historical brutality or whatever from this group. But what you're doing is you're just dressed like a Nazi stormtrooper and you're running around in Nuketown or some fucking Call of Duty map, shooting at other people who are wearing similarly meaningless fashion skins, and just shooting with different faction-specific guns. That's all that's occurring. There is no actual ideology. This isn't even like music or a television show or a book or a movie. There's actually no imparting of political information or philosophical ideas whatsoever, Dan. It's just a game. You're insane.
By the time you've played 100 hours of being a Nazi, their voice stabs become memes and in-jokes with your friends.
The random shit the Nazis yell in German is now a meme. That's like thinking that the German people are actually made out of sauerkraut or are all named Jerry just because I played as the British. Are you retarded?
By the 1000th time you've respawned as a terrorist, you're either celebrating them or making fun of them.
By the 1000th time I've spawned as a terrorist is the 1000th game I've played of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Dan. That's it. That means I like that game. I don't even know if it's explicitly saying what the fuck the terrorists in Counter-Strike are. What are they, like Chechnyan extremists or something? Who gives a shit? They wear ski masks. They don't hardly say anything. They plant a bomb on dust and that's it. You fucking mongoloid retard.
Neither of which helps the global crisis we have that takes thousands of lives every year.
Dan, what global crisis that takes thousands of lives every year? What the fuck are you talking about? How does this have anything whatsoever to do with any video game whatsoever? Dan, are you literally losing touch with reality? Do you actually understand what a coherent train of thought is? Can you actually tie related ideas together to persuade me of literally fucking anything? What you're doing right now is gibberish. It's meaningless fucking gibberish, Dan.
So what do? That's easy. Don't make them morally equivalent.
There are no morals imparted!
Moral difference between your Nazis and your allies. Between your terrorists and your counter-terrorists.
Dan, the reason why there's no difference between them is because there's actually no ideology, conversation taking place at all. It's a game. The objectives of the game are to plant bomb, defuse bomb, kill enemy team. Or get a certain number of kills in 20 minutes. Or get a certain number of points by taking over objectives. Or just last one standing deathmatch. There's no equivalency of any idea to any other idea. There's actually no ideas. There's no fucking ideas, Dan. You're a retard.
Frame PvP as a training exercise.
When he said frame PvP as a training exercise, he implied that we need to not actually have any kind of war faction people against any kind of war faction people, and none of the above should be carrying actual firearms. What he literally drew is like somebody from Photon or Tron, some sort of space age rubber foam outfit, and literally shoot at each other with squirt guns that literally have the word Nerf written across the side of them. Which, by the way, if you're going to draw squirt guns, Dan, the correct company name to put on it is Super Soaker. You fucking drooling pond scum amoeba vaguely sculpted into the shape of a human being.
Or simply take one of your non-odious sides and recolor them so that it's red versus blue, rather than Axis versus Allies.
Then go play Halo. If you want red versus blue, go play Halo, Dan. I need more nicotine for this. This has been a long video recording session. I'm very sorry.
A good example of a game that does this is Rainbow Six Siege. All of your bomb diffusion and hostage rescue multiplayer with no normalizing terrorists.
Dan, that implies that the people taking the hostages that are being rescued in certain game modes are the good guys, or that when there's two groups of people who are killing each other with advanced gunfighting and squad techniques, that both of them are good guys even though they're killing each other. That literally makes no fucking sense. There's nothing coherent about what you just said. Are you schizophrenic, Dan?
In fact, by having all of the characters as counter-terrorists, training for a possible threat.
The visual aid for all of the characters doing counterterrorism is, of course, a white woman, an indistinguishably brown woman, and a black man. Diversity, yay!
In fact, by having all of the characters as counter-terrorists, training for a possible threat, it highlights how real and present of a threat that is.
What threat, Dan? Wait, are you implying that we should only play cooperative first-person shooters where we always play a villain, which is politically or ideologically or philosophically or just in a story sense, somebody you think is bad, and then we only cooperate, so no competitive first-person shooters, only cooperative shooters, where we always play as the good guys? Well, I used to love playing a game called Killing Floor, where the only players are humans fighting zombies, who are all computers. I loved that game. Killing Floor 2 sucks, by the way.
And if you decide that you need to have both sides be playable, don't make them interchangeable. Don't have players randomly spawn in as one or the other. Allow players to choose which side they're on. Now, of course, this has all sorts of in-game problems.
I will list off multiple possible in-game problems for your idea, Dan. This would actually encourage players to divide themselves and compete with each other in a more animosity-based way. That you would actually be encouraging people who are mean or sadistic or bullies or something to identify with a predetermined, openly described bad guy side. And they would feel more, like they have a responsibility to uphold the bad guy side, to behave like a bad guy. I'm not necessarily saying like a Nazi or whatever, or a racist, but just that they should be inspired to behave in a malicious role, because at the end of the day, this is still a role-playing video game. You're just adding the roles to what was previously actually a role-less game, you fucking idiot, and you weren't able to describe the game as having actual roles. But once you say specifically, there are roles, there are the goody two-shoes paragons, and there are the renegades, you're going to find out that people want to role-play in a fantasy make-believe game as a bad guy. Possibly because they don't do anything bad guy in real life, and it's just a way to blow off steam. So, and it's more than likely that if you're playing the bad guy role that's openly said bad guy, you might be more likely to call somebody a nigger, or say you fuck somebody's mom, or to harass people, or send angry messages to their Xbox Live or some shit, when maybe you wouldn't have normally behaved like that. And that the actual reinforcement of ideas beyond just you are the bad guy that would occur is between the actual players talking to each other, reinforcing certain methods of talking, which may or may not be anything of what I just said, or could be worse than what I just said. You don't know. And then the good guys would feel like they have a moral responsibility to crush the other side instead of just a game responsibility to win by points. There's actually a meaningful difference there. So what you want to have happen, Dan, will actually encourage hostility and animosity between players, not discourage it. You are fucking stupid.
Such as creating shorter wait times for fascists. But you know what? Those wait times could be artificially extended.
What he just said is, in order to make sure that some people will play as the fascist, give them shorter wait times so that of course everybody's going to want to play as the good guys, which is not necessarily true. You haven't demonstrated that either. Or that people need incentive to play as the bad guys in a fantasy fucking video game, which is not true. If you know anybody who plays sandbox video games like Grand Theft Auto or Skyrim or whatever, that most people steal, kill civilians, and do morally dubious or evil things in the game because it's a game. Because you can't do those things in real life. Because there's actually nobody being hurt or any consequences because it's a game. So which is why he just said, oh, maybe we should extend the wait time for the fascist side to punish the players for picking the fascists. The fuck are you doing, Dan? That doesn't make any sense.
If it meant players had an active choice in what teams they would represent, if you're saying we need people playing Nazis in our games. And if you're going to say, but we need it for his weekly extended. If it meant players had an active choice in what teams they would represent, if you're saying we need people playing Nazis in our games. And if you're going to say, but we need it for historical reasons, then your game better actually be historical.
Dan, you don't know what is or is not historical. You're a retard. The responsibility should not be up to you to decide what is historically accurate or not. You can't even correctly identify what is morally good or what is actually safe for any kind of group. You're just too fucking stupid to have any kind of control. So he's implying some kind of malicious intent by people saying we have to have fascists, people have to play the fascists, so we need it for historical reasons. And he shows like some shifty character going like this, only he's like pointing at a book. Dan, you can't tell the difference between reality and a game, can you? I'm not being facetious or joking around with you. You are literally, in real life, in need of medical and psychological help. You cannot distinguish fantasy from reality. I'm not kidding, Dan.
You can't really just hide behind the fact you called your desert map El Alamein and say, but it's historical. If that were the case, you need your PvP to at least represent real historical events. And
No! No! If you're playing an actual scenario where you're replicating a historical event, you have a responsibility to thematically and dialogue, yada, 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 show the actual intentions and actions of each side. In a PvP setting, you have skins and players competing in a game like football or baseball for points. You fucking drooling, chest-slapping, mindless, fucking pea-brained, fucking arthropod.
And be a realistic take on those battles. Once you make both sides balanced, it's also no longer historical.
Dan, the reason why balance is there is to make the game fair. If you were to portray anything realistic about World War II, most people would die from getting firebombed or from having their fucking trench gassed or something like that, or drown in a sea engagement. And most people would not be shooting. They'd be sitting in a mess tent or in a communications tent or fucking on guard duty or on patrol, walking around looking at nothing. You don't know anything about war. You don't know anything about the consequences of war. You don't know anything about the ideologies that are behind war and start wars and end wars. You know nothing about nothing. You are too fucking stupid to comment on any facet of this multifaceted issue. Dan, you're a fucking retard.
And you can't really say that you need Nazis anymore for historical accuracy. Oh, and once you let players get cool weapons that weren't actually at that particular battleground, it's also no longer historically accurate.
Dan, I know you're implying that the historical context thing is disingenuous, but nobody's actually used historical context to either justify putting in or removing fascists from a game. They've used historical shit to protest diversity, like in Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is set in 15th century Czech Republic. A bunch of people like you, Dan, were saying, why are there no black people in this game? Because there were no black people in fucking Prague in the 15th century. In 1408, there were no black people there. None. Why are there no women on the front lines of World War II? Because there were no women on the front lines of World War II, with very small exceptions like Germany late in the war and the Russians late in the war, due to literal lack of manpower and the requirement needing to have basically children and women carry guns, as well as elderly men who normally would have been disqualified from warfighting due to a literal lack of manpower. There was actually no evidence to suggest that any side of the war thought women were fit for active infantry duty, because there was literally no faction in World War II that thought women were qualified for active duty. Literally fucking none of them. You're a fucking retard, Dan.
And you can't declare that your game will suffer if you don't put players in the jackboots of the Third Reich.
People would find it very confusing that the main antagonist of World War II at large, Germany, not being in the game, when it's a World War II warfighting game, people would object to that basically as a matter of course. Not because they were pro or against the ideology of National Socialism, Dan, but because Germany was an integral part of the historical events. And most of what people want to have in these games that sometimes literally don't include a story mode anymore, is just to have the setting and the skins for a simple, mindless game. A sport, essentially, that's literally competed as what they call esports, where people run around and shoot at each other. And there's nothing more to it than that. Dan.
And once your map is something carefully designed to have good gameplay by a team in a room in San Francisco or LA, and it's not a faithful reconstruction.
That needs to be repeated again. Listen very closely.
In the jackboots of the Third Reich. And once your map is something carefully designed to have good gameplay by a team in a room in San Francisco or LA, designed to have good gameplay by a team in a room in San Francisco or LA, team in a room in San Francisco or LA, a room in San Francisco or LA, a room in San Francisco or LA, a room in San Francisco or LA.
Are you catching the drift of what I'm talking about here? Dan doesn't give a shit about a game. He actually is not talking about a game. I am actually willing to put forth the idea that Dan is literally being disingenuous and that he doesn't give a shit about what he's talking about. He thinks that what we're talking about is the difference between Nazis and my alt-right and video game developers, which are automatically on his side because they're a team from San Francisco or LA. Why do you think he put that meaningless point of the location of the game developers in there? He's implying that the game developers have a specific ideology and that they should be entitled to and morally responsible for never putting fascists in their game whatsoever, because after all, they're progressives and social justice warriors in a room in San Francisco or LA. In a van down by the river! You fucking retard, Dan.
And it's not a faithful reconstruction of the actual places the historical events occurred in.
Dan, nobody cares. He's saying, oh, if you're going to put fascists in the game, then literally everything has to be the same. The German Sten guns have to jam all the time, and the fucking Italians have to have shitty pistols, and the Japanese have to have basically nothing work ever except for their planes and boats. And and everything has to be historically accurate down to the fucking block and individual building and front structure of a fucking store. Are you retarded, Dan? Stop lying. Stop willfully, knowingly lying like we're all stupid.
You can no longer say we need to have players take up arms in service of terror or hate.
Dan, nobody is taking up arms in service of any ideology whatsoever. They're taking up a controller to play a competitive first-person shooter game, you fucking psychopath.
And look, we're not saying we can't have games about World War II or about terrorism.
Yes, you are. Stop lying.
We're not even saying we shouldn't make games where you play as a Nazi or a terrorist.
Yes, you are. Stop lying.
But what we are saying is that the fact that you're playing as a Nazi or a terrorist in a game has to mean something.
No, it doesn't, Dan, and it's actually better. It's actually to what you want's benefit. You're more likely to have what you want if people are not forced to engage with, side with, and compete with opposing ideas of anything inside of a mindless, fucking, stupid, common denominator, retard, Chad, and fucking squeakers, fucking frat boys smoking pot, and fucking 8-year-olds on the floor in fucking mommy's living room playing Call of Duty. It's better if there's actually nothing ideological involved in this endeavor. It's better if it's mindless. It should stay mindless. The purpose of it is to be mindless. Why do you want people, again, a lot of them playing this kind of bullshit are very small children despite not being the target audience of said game, is a significant portion, as much or more than 50% of it is fucking little kids playing this shit. Why do you want to have to engage them on complex and scary and fucking mature themes such as genocide and shit when they're just playing a game?
And it can't just be a skin. It can't be something that a game randomly drops you into.
It should be.
Really, if we are saying anything in this episode, it's this. Games can do better. And
games are already doing significantly better than what you want, you fucking moron.
In this particular case, it's not even that hard to do better.
Yeah, it actually only takes a few idiots like you in charge of a development team to produce some bullshit like Battlefield 5 or Mass Effect Andromeda. Dan, you fucking ridiculous idiot.
And it's no more costly to do better. All it requires...
Yes, it is. If you keep producing bullshit like Ghostbusters 2016, Answer the Call, or you keep producing bullshit like The Last Jedi, or you continue to produce fucking suffering succotash bullshit like Battlefield 5, or fucking other fucking pushy shit like fucking Dragon Age Inquisition and shit that people sour on because they feel like they're being morally jerked off in the face of when they just want to play a game. Look, I don't want to engage transsexuality or homosexuality when I'm playing a fantasy game. Maybe I want to be able to have the very low-resolution, stupid romance opposition between guys, like fucking Shepard and Garrus and shit. However, I just want it to be like that instead of them sending me some sort of shtick about women in my culture are the same as men, or transgender people are like a third gender in my fucking religion because they're inspired by some sort of a genderless god soul or something. Like, quit trying to make all this shit to fucking jerk off in my face. Just like, okay, the dudes can fuck and the girls can fuck. There, who cares? None of that matters at all. At all. It doesn't mean anything. Stop jerking off in my face. So when the most mindless, meaningless, literally everybody looks down on shooters, Twitch shooters, because it's mindless and stupid and played by the mindless and the stupid. Not all of you, of course, but it's a stereotype for a fucking reason. They don't need to be engaged with this idea. And if you think that people need to be presented with the ideas of fascists and the ideas of anti-fascists, you have problems. People may identify with either or, and you don't want them to identify with the fascists. So you might obviously uncharitably or fuck with or limit the information you get from the fascists and heavily incentivize people for believing the anti-fascist. And what a lot of people are going to see in this scenario is not anti-fascist good, fascist bad. They're going to see anti-fascists unfairly advantaged and stroked, and the anti-fascists are cartoonishly evil, uncharitably treated, and it's not fair. And they may sympathize because the main moral compunction of all human beings, in fact, all primates down to fucking chimpanzees and bonobos, is the idea of fairness. So it's actually better to never have these two things compete at all rather than to produce a rigged game between the ideologies and force the players to engage it. It's actually more likely to keep people from thinking about fascism by not talking about it than to uncharitably, cartoonishly say shit about it. People are actually going to identify more with Nazis if you constantly call them Nazis when they're not Nazis, Dan. If you see Nazis behind the fucking woodwork like a paranoid schizophrenic or a fucking meth head who's been tweaked out for a week, and you see shadow people everywhere, well, recognize that you're paranoid, you're delusional, and that you're insane, and that whatever reality is more likely than not the opposite of what you think it is, Dan. So it's actually better to never discuss these ideas at all than to use your bullshit retard fucking logic to try to engage them. People are more likely to side with fascism if you have the responsibility of talking about fascism, because you are irresponsible and fucking stupid. Dan, you understand me?
Is that we in the game industry be cognizant of the world around us and what these symbols we're drawing on mean. That we think as we're building, not just about the game we're working on.
Dan, the entire point of first-person shooters is to not think. It is literally a form of game that does not have a story by design, by definition, on purpose. A multiplayer deathmatch is nothing more than a competitive sport, literally. It's like soccer, but with a mouse and a keyboard, you fucking retard. I'm not kidding. If you want an interactive story, if you want to complain about stormtroopers and the First Order and fucking the Empire and fucking demons and shit and blah, 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 and an actual single-player story-driven campaign, if you want to say like, oh, Nintendo is making Ganon look like he's righteous or some bullshit, then maybe you have a point. You have literally no point whatsoever. You're stupid. You're fucking stupid. This entire video is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
But about the world as a whole. If we can do that, we can take a big step forward for the industry. We can stop helping to normalize Nazis.
Nobody's normalizing Nazis, Dan. You're a fucking retard. All anybody is going to get from watching this video is that whatever Dan believes in must be stupid, because Dan is apocalyptically fucking dust mite level intelligent fucking stupid. Dan, you are so malicious, dishonest, disingenuous, and fucking retarded that you make anything that you're associated with look bad. You make the entirety of extra credits look bad. You look for the ideologies and ideas that you present look bad. You are too fucking dumb to be a fucking spokesperson or a persuader or a fucking philosopher about anything, Dan. You're a fucking idiot. You are a detriment to anything you're associated with. You are a drain onto society, and we'd be better off if you didn't exist. It's not a threat, by the way. It just means that you are less than worthless, Dan. You're a disease. Literally.